Okay, so I want to talk to you all a little bit about role clarity. And what I mean with that is role clarity within the match official team. So if you're a referee, what's your role as a referee? If you're an assistant referee, what's your role as an assistant referee? And if you're lucky enough to have a VAR or a television match official, what's your role clarity there? And I think you can apply this to any level in any situation that you're working with your team of four. So mainly it'd be between a referee and an assistant referee. And when you're approaching a game, I think it's really important to know, right, what is your role in certain aspects of a game? So, for example, around communication, what is your role around communication? So how are you going to communicate to each other during a game? So, in rugby, how do we communicate an offside? What do we say? And to really drill down in that detail, because I think it's really important, because when you're running around and if you're mic'd up, and if you haven't agreed beforehand how you're going to communicate things, then you might miss some information that the touch judges or assistant referee is trying to give you. And that's going to be to the detriment of your performance in the game as well. So other areas of the game, if you break down the areas of the game, so rugby is probably a bit more simple than other sports. So you can split the game up into key focus areas. So you'd be looking at foul play, you'd be looking at set piece, the scrum, the line out maul, you'd be looking at offsides, and you go through for each of those areas, right, what is your role? So if you're an assistant referee around the line out maul, what is your role? What are you looking for? So in rugby union, the way that we talk about it now as a group is we say, right, if the referee's standing at the back, these are the 2 or 3 things that he's going to be looking at. So it might be, he's going to be ball focused, and he's going to look at the contest in the air, and the assistant referee at the front, this is your role in this situation. You might be looking at the early drive by the defence. You might be looking at the defence sacking a lifter. Because what you cannot have in these situations, you can't be looking at the same thing. Because if you're both looking at the same thing, then you're potentially going to miss something. And I think that's really important. Role clarity around foul play. So if you get an incident of foul play, what's going to happen? And this could then go down the route of a bit of role play. So you might rehearse this as a team. So you talk about it in your prep, which we've touched about in another video. When you're dealing with foul play, what is your role as an assistant referee? What is your role as a referee? How are you going to challenge people? How are you going to communicate to each other? And you can break that down. And then you can go, without going into specific incidents, again, it's not about if we get this incident on a pitch, if we get a high tackle, how are we going to deal with it? That's going into the detail. Go back to the start is, right, what process are we going to be using to deal with foul play today? So are you going to expect the assistant referees to flag foul play? How do you want them to communicate it? The conversation that you have on the pitch, what ways you want that conversation to go? Who leads it? Who follows? Do you have any key trigger words? My advice, especially when dealing with foul play, would be just to keep it really, really simple. And if you're finding that you're in your prep and when you're talking about role clarity, you're going into sort of 10, 12 different points, you've got too much information there. So try and simplify it, and again, give them 2 or 3 things to think about for each area of the game. So when we're talking about scrummaging, for example, the assistant referee, what are you looking at? You're looking at the loose head bind, you're looking at the tight head bind. Just keep it really simple like that. Here's a good picture around loose head bind, here's a bad picture. Here's a good picture around tight head bind, here's a bad picture. And if you get that detail in your role and the clarity around what you want them to look at, you've got a much better chance of getting the right decision in games. So when we're talking about role clarity in certain situations, so I'll try and give an example around foul play. So foul play in games, if you haven't got a TMO, you've got to deal with it. And they can take you by surprise, these incidents in games. So what's really important is, A, you've got to see it, and B, you've then got to deal with it. So again, it's talking to the touch judge beforehand, saying, right, for example, kicks and late charges on the kicker. So you've got to be really careful, around what you're asking them to do. So it might be, right, I'm going to go with the ball as the referee. Assistant referee, you make sure you stay with the guys kick that ball, because then one of you is going to see if there's a dangerous tackle or a late tackle. And I guess it's the same in football as well, if there's a late tackle on once you pass the ball. So what I would say is, when you get an incident of foul play, if the referee, you've seen it, the biggest thing to do is give yourself time to deal with this situation and process what you've seen. Because these are big game-changing moments. To give a red card in a game is not easy. So make it easy by giving yourself time to deal with it. So you see, for example, you see a really dangerous tackle in the air, Okay, go and blow your whistle, and then I would say, get information by going and talking to your touch judge. And this is something that you'll agree beforehand, and you agree how you'll do this. So it'll be right. In my experience, was right. Let's keep it really simple, and let's stick to the facts. So you're not getting emotional. You're not talking about the consequences of it, as in, oh my God, the player's really injured, so I need to deal with it. You're sticking to the facts of the situation. So when you blow your whistle, you go and talk to your assistant referee, and you say, right, I've seen a tackle in the air by white 11, and the player who was tackled landed on his head. And that's when role clarity comes in. It's then the assistant referee's job to challenge you on the facts that you've seen. And the assistant referee might come in and say, no, actually it was white 12. Okay, brilliant. So white 12, tackle in the air, and the player who's tackled landed on his head. Or it might be the assistant referee would come in and say, actually, no, he didn't land on his head. He landed on his foot first, and then he landed on his side. And that would be the difference between you giving a red card and a yellow card. And that's just how you could play that role out. And again, beforehand, you could apply that to any situation. So blow your whistle, take time, gather the facts, challenge the facts with your team around you.